Monarch Aragon Contemporary is thrilled to have Robert Michael Jones here tonight. I met Robert last summer, and actually I met him, he didn't meet me. I just sort of walked into his studio during open studio night, and he was talking to a group of people about his artwork, and his passion and dedication to his work was truly inspiring. And so we're thrilled that not even a year later, we have him and his work here tonight. It's part of an exhibition, Deep Mind, which really explores a lot of areas of technology in modern society, which I will let Robert speak more of. Thank you for coming, Robert.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming, everybody. I wanted to start the talk with a quote that I actually ran into just yesterday by Aaron Frank. He's a professor at Singularity University. The quote is, "The human mind faced with uncertainty, the human mind faced with the uncertainty of the reality we exist in creates myths." These myths that we create are an effort to explain these big philosophical questions that we've always had. If you look back to Plato's allegory of the cave, people have always pursued these questions. We want to know what the nature of the shadows on the wall are. And from an early age, I really took interest in these big philosophical questions. They're what inspires me, and they're largely what still inspires me. I realized that religion didn't really have the answers that I was looking for, and so I kind of turned towards science and math. And I sucked up as much of it as I could as a youngster, and even into my college years. I studied astronomy and chemistry and physics, and eventually, there's a beauty to it, to the objectivity of it, the ability to give us answers that really seem real. But eventually, your professors and my teachers stop giving you answers, and they start saying things like, we don't know what came before the Big Bang, or we don't know what sparked human intelligence. We may never know. And it's like at times like these where I started to realize that this pursuit, the pursuit of science, is a creative pursuit, and it isn't separate from art, as we sometimes think about it. They're both creative pursuits, and they're both seek to explain our place. I also realized, if you could have talked to Leonardo da Vinci, like the great Renaissance man of all time, I doubt very much that he would have saw that distinction that we think of today between art and science. I think he was just creative, and he was just pursuing that creativity. And I also realized that ideas are real things. Science may not tell us where ideas come from, what the cause of an idea is, but the effects we can see, and they're huge. Everything, it comes from these ideas that we have. There's a whole host of other things that I could point to as why I make art. My mother was very encouraging of it, and my father was a builder. I get to grow up in nature, which I think that alone is maybe one of the biggest influences in why I make artwork. Nature really is like the most pure form of inspiration that we get. Everything, all of human invention comes from nature. It's really all we have is the observable universe to look at. The shadows on the wall, as it were, to refer back to Plato's allegory. And I think growing up in nature gave me a strong curiosity for nature, and it also really enforced the ability to change it. My brothers and I would just be running around in the woods, cutting down trees and making tree forts. And we didn't even really know why we were doing it. We just had energy, and we had the impulse and the freedom to change our environment. And I think that's enough, and that really does spark creative thinking. It's funny though, I don't really ever think about these things unless I'm giving a talk like this or writing a bio. It all just kind of becomes who you are. And so what I really look to and what really inspires my work is looking forward and looking at all the invention and the discovery that people make. And really beyond that too, this sort of abstract thought, but if you'll stay with me, it's the increasing complexity of information. If you go back all the way back to the Big Bang, the beginning of time, and there's only helium and hydrogen in the universe, and that's it. And then fast forward to today, and we are the most complex form of information that we know of. And we can observe the universe. The universe created a way for it to observe itself. It's pretty amazing. And this zoomed out way of thinking is certainly a way that I like to think, and it's something that you'll see in my work. It's kind of zoomed out perspective. For this group of work in particular, this show starts with the beginning of humanity. 200,000 years ago, people in our modern forms first walked into the earth, we've been here for 200,000 years. But today is the most exciting time ever to be alive. If you'd been born 2,000 years ago and you could have lived for 1,000 years, almost nothing in terms of civilization, in terms of what was possible, would have changed. If you were born 500 years ago and you could have lived for 100 years, again, almost nothing would have changed. Today, every day, the world changes. We can communicate worldwide. We can make these virtual reality experiences that challenge how we think of reality, cure diseases. Like, these are just a few things that have already happened. Technology has given us the power to change how we live, but I don't think that that's all that's changing. I think how we think and who we are is changing too. So with this show and looking at this and thinking about these ideas and these changes that are happening, I wanted to first start with the past and where we came from and who we were. And so the show both looks back into the past and into the future to try to show the feeling, if not maybe the direction of the present, of where we are today. As I began to think about these changes, I wanted to talk about storytelling. Okay, these are all, I think of my work in terms of storytelling, and storytelling's played an important role throughout history. It's how we pass on information, it's how we gain new perspectives. Whether you're looking to the past, looking at Gilgamesh or the Iliad or the Bible, they're all use characters and story to try to show us where we came from and how we might live. And it's this form of storytelling is one that I use in my work, only sort of in reverse. There's no text or no mythology that the images are based off. I just give you the visual image, the character themselves, and some visual context in the way of the materials that I've chosen, which may reference technology or the city or industry. And then it's up to the audience, it's up to the viewer to build that story. I want to talk also about both humanism and existentialism. They're both philosophies that have played an important role throughout art history, and they both inform my work to some extent. To start with humanism, one of my favorite sculptors, Medardo Rosso, he was an Italian sculptor, contemporary of Rodin and Degas. And Medardo Rosso made these beautiful portraits. He used this technique that was new at the time, using wax over stone or over plaster. And he had this quality in his work that really brought the portraits to life. There's a light and a softness and an expression in his figures that really makes them transcend being objects. Material objects into he bestows a quality of life. You see people in them, you see yourself in them a little bit, and this really inspired me, and it's something that I try to do in my own work. That idea, I think that's partly why I'm a sculptor, that idea that you can bring something to life. I think sculpture is especially good at that. Moving forward in history to another of my favorite sculptors, Giacometti, who I referenced directly in my newest piece, just behind you, the tall rusted figure there, escaping existentialism. Giacometti was an existentialist sculptor. And if you're not familiar, if I could summarize existentialism, the philosophy, it places humans as rational actors in an irrational world. And while I don't believe in existentialism as a philosophy, I think it does a lot to capture the feeling of what it is to be a modern person. The smallness and the insignificance that we can feel in the face of these giant forces that we know to exist, natural disasters, nuclear war, just the sheer size and scope of the universe. It makes you feel very small and can make you feel insignificant. And I think that Giacometti and the philosophy of existentialism really captures that. And so my work, I'm talking about this because my work is in this figurative tradition of using the figure to try and identify the human condition. And it pulls from both of these, trying to capture the life and the hope of humanism and the feeling and maybe the incompleteness of existentialism, and to tell and to bring both of those to these stories and tell about, the present, about what it is like to be a person today. Art is a mirror for society, I think, and the rapid integration of biological human intelligence and non-biological computer intelligence that's happening seems like one of the most profound and phenomenon of our time. I think at the opening to this exhibition, I saw a 2-year-old in a stroller swiping away at her iPad for hours, entertaining herself. This little girl is going to grow up in a fundamentally different world than any of us did. And she's going to have a deep mental integration with intelligent computing technology. All these pieces are, the stories that they tell, they all inform one another, and it's why I'm really happy to have them all shown together like this. It's certainly how they were intended to be shown. I want to thank Elsie for making that possible. Another really cool thing that we did at the opening was we were able to bring in some cutting edge virtual reality technology. We had a headset here for people to try, which was really important to me because I think some people have heard about this technology and not gotten to use it, or they've sometimes not even heard about it. And so to be able to bring that in to show people as they're in an art show that talks about these types of innovations is really important. And I think it's powerful collaboration between art and science to be able to bring that science into the art gallery. I've come to believe that the use of new media in the artwork is really important and powerful when discussing the subject matter, because the artwork itself becomes the interaction that you're trying to discuss. So I look forward to doing a lot more of this, a lot more work with new media, with video and installation, and hopefully new technologies as they emerge in my work. Finally, I wanted to talk about my art practice, about how I make work. It's really two different ways that I make sculptures when I'm in my studio. There's one is an idea-based way of making, which is to say that it's kind of where my ideas come from. And the way that I go about it is really to write the ideas down whenever they happen, whether I'm wake up in the middle of the night or I'm listening to a podcast or reading a book. If something's inspiring me and really gets me thinking, I'll write it down. I'll make a sketch maybe in the sketchbook and try to fit it in with other ideas that you've had. And oftentimes I leave it alone for long periods of time, and I come back to it later. And it's actually an amazing generator of inspiration and ideas to be able to take the new experiences and the new information that you've gathered from your current self and go back in time to your sketchbooks where you have old ideas or kind of states of mind that you used to have. And it's like becomes this collaboration with yourself from the future and yourself from the past. And it's very, that's one of the ways in which is helpful for me to generate ideas. And the other way, well, one more thing about that is that the ideas portion of my work is really important to me, because what I do, there's all different ways to make art, but what I do is not art for art's sake. There's more intention than that. I have attempting to be a part of a bigger conversation and to talk about things that I both find interesting and that I think are valuable for people to talk about and to learn about. The other way that I make things is a material-based way of making, and this is like the play. This is the childish kind of playing that I do in the studio, which is just getting my hands on new materials and exploring the material, and it's where the inspiration comes from the material itself, from working it. And this is extremely valuable in that this is how you find out both what a material can do and also what it wants to do. What type of expression is each material kind of predisposed to? And by doing this experimentation, hopefully by the time you have one of these ideas that you really like, that you want to go after, now you know how to make it happen. And you know what materials to use to make that best happen. I mean, and the great thing about this is the surprise that you get from working with new materials. They're constantly surprising you and showing you what can be done with them. For instance, like you see a lot of wire and concrete figures in the show. When I first moved to San Diego a little over 4 years ago, I didn't have a studio. I needed a material that I could work with in my apartment, and I picked up some wire for the first time. And I found the expression and the way of working, the energy that I could capture with wire. And then remembering a conversation I had with my older brother, who was an architect, something about compressive and tensile strength, I think. And I decided to add concrete to the wire and experiment with that. And I found that the two together really, they captivated me, and and I found, I think, a way of making these figures come to life and with all of that emotion and feeling and energy that I wanted to put into them. So that's how I make, one last thing, I know I already said finally, but finally, I wanted to leave you guys with is, I think all the talk about science and technology, it can feel a little abstract, it can feel a little hypothetical, like it's tied to some futurism that may or may not even happen, or that I'm trying to predict the future. And I don't think anyone really can. I think even the experts are finding that it's almost impossible to predict what happens in the future. But the work and the looking at this relationship between humans and technology really is a way to find out about ourselves. In the same way, for the longest time, we have compared ourselves to nature. And nature is sort of like this measuring tape for humanity. We look at nature and often we set ourselves apart from it, or we think we're above it in some ways, or certainly have in the past. And technology, I think, is just another one of these things like nature. It's another measuring tape to measure ourselves against, to show us more about who we are and try to identify that human condition, that urge to know what it all is and what this all means and where our place is. So that's all for my talk. Thank you guys again for coming. And if anybody has any questions, don't be shy, anything about the show, individual pieces, or the art world in general.
So you talked a lot about technology and the objects that you use. What about bronze? How do you see that medium moving forward, not just in your career, but as an art form? Do you see it becoming almost blasé because it has been used over the centuries in sculptures, and maybe moving into the future we expect something else?
Well, that's an interesting question. Bronze is a medium that I actually started in when I was in college. I started working with bronze, or rather, you really are working with wax or clay when you're working with bronze. Bronze is sort of the final transition of the material. And bronze is an interesting one because normally I'm kind of a purist in terms of materials. I like to use the materials, like I said, to kind of what they like to be used for. Steel is good at certain things, concrete is good at certain things, clay is good for certain expression. Bronze is one of these things that's really great at everything. It's why it's been such a popular medium throughout history, and it also lasts forever and doesn't really tarnish. So there's a lot of advantages to using bronze. I think it will continue to be a tool that artists use. I'm often limited by expense in using bronze, but I also try to limit it because it does seem like a bit of a crutch, I think, to have. It's not a material that you necessarily have to look into the material itself to find expression. You can sort of do whatever you want with bronze, and so I try to limit it in that use. I think what I try to do with my bronze is I try to stay true. I sculpt directly in wax. A lot of people using bronze do clay, and then they translate that to wax, and then that gets translated into bronze. I sculpt directly in wax, mostly just because I prefer it, but I think that the bronze that I do make is really just that wax made to last. You know, the expression that's in my bronze work is the expression that I find in the material wax. So that's how I like to use it.
Robert,
Yeah.
you said something earlier that I really wanted to capture, so I don't think I wrote it correctly, so you don't have to expand on it, but maybe you could help me say how you said it. The universe created a way to see itself?
To observe itself, yeah.
To observe itself.
Yeah, it's. I like to go down all these rabbit holes of like these huge, mind-blowing ideas, and that's one of them that I've run into. Is I mean, really, when you're looking at people's place in the universe, and you really zoom out to what we are and what it is, it all gets very abstract. But I think it is a profound change. I mean, when we look at any other form of matter, any other form of life, what kind of sets us apart is that we can observe, I think, we can observe the whole thing. We can see the system that we're in, you know what I mean? We are like the fish that understands it's in water, kind of a thing.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions, anybody?
I think for me it's interesting to get your perspective on how ironic it is that you use materials that have been around for years to express a future of intelligence and technology that is in the future, but have not been influenced on using technology to create your vision of the future.
I think looking at it's all very relative, to time now. I mean, all this new media and everything is all very, very new. If you think in the scope of, like I was talking about, the time that people have been here, it's, bronze has not been around for that long either. And that's a technology that's really is fairly new too, even though it doesn't seem new to us within our lifespans. But I mean, there's a real beauty in the material, and I think I'll continue to use it for its purpose. But I am shifting towards using more new media, just because, and that's also based on the subject matter that I'm exploring. I want to continue exploring this theme of interconnectivity with technology, but it's not the only subject matter that I'm exploring either. I did last year. I did a whole show about this homeless schizophrenic woman that I encountered in Venice Beach on the boardwalk there, who was was an amazing character in her expression, in her kind of lack of grasp of reality, and just seemed to be kind of in this realm that we're in, but also not at all, and just changing. Her emotions are going up, and so there's moments within this whole human experience that I find really interesting that kind of exist outside of just the conversation of where technology might be taking us. But in discussing that, I do want to push myself and challenge myself to use more new media.
Well, thank you so much, Robert.
Joy, do you want to go?
Well, I'm not sure how to word this question because I think you've answered it, Robert, already, and I'll probably get it later. But as a human being, yourself, of course, and these art pieces are coming out of you or out of somewhere, we don't know. Do you, and I'm inspired by the unfoldment into something that's emerging, that's maybe bigger than you, that's coming through you. But do you have any visceral feeling of it? Does that make sense?
I think I know. Like, do I feel like I'm channeling some bigger force or something?
Yeah. Or do you wake up, like maybe on the day when it's chaotic and you think, what is happening to me? Or I don't know quite how to say that, but I mean, to me, because I'm not an artist, but I love your work so much. And, you know, when I look at this one that's praying, I think, what would it feel like to be in Robert's body and to be his form and who he is and have that come out of you? Do you have any?
Well, I think that, I mean, the creative process is amazing. There's artists all over, and we do, you know, pursue that creativity and those ideas, I think a little bit more than maybe most people, but I mean, I wake up inspired, and I wake up with these new ideas. So, you know, like I said, I don't know where they come from. I feel like everything around me, every interaction, every experience that I've had has formed who I am. And I think if I'm channeling anything bigger, it's that. It's like all the other things that I've encountered in my life, I guess. I don't know. We continue to encounter more things. So it's only going to get more interesting from here.
It's not gonna get- I'm sure you're right. I feel that.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you.